Hi, Internet. It's me, Emily S.W.
Sam.
We're here with another chit-chat here. We're kind of branching out. It's not just literature. We're going to touch on mostly literature and some other things we're talking about. Witches.
Ooh. This is a continuation, in a way, of our vampire chit-chat.
Yes.
Kind of the same idea, except, as previously mentioned, not just focusing on Gothic literature or literature in general, but still printed media.
Yes.
For the most part.
For the most part, yeah. We will go into a little bit of... Because witches are such a popular thing, so like we did with vampires, we will touch on modern media. Like movies.
Mm-hmm.
A little more than that, but everything we're discussing today in this chit-chat has nothing to do with people who practice witchcraft or are pagan or Wiccan or anything like that. We are not talking about modern witches or the practice of witchcraft as a religion. We are talking only about the historical context, about books, folklore, movies, TV shows, basically what people thought about witches and witchcraft in different time periods, what was written about them that formed those opinions. We are in no way referencing people who practice witchcraft in any way, shape, or form. Purely fictional. We are talking about fictional witches.
In a similar vein, we also have a bit of a progression going on here.
Yes.
So this is going to be basically how cultural perception of witches has changed over the years, and how they're portrayed changing.
And boy, has it gone through some stages. Barely recognizable, the modern witch from the original, at least in literature.
I have read some books.
And as usual, I didn't read the books, but I've reaped the benefits. And so, audience, we're distilling this for you. And if you're interested, obviously, we're going to be listing, everything that we're saying. So if you want to read further...
So we're going to start in Greece with the Odyssey.
Yes. For those of you listening at home, can you guess who we're about to say? That's right! It's Circe! Circe from the Odyssey. You may remember her, or you may not. Maybe you fell asleep in that high school class. Maybe you didn't read it.
I did read the Odyssey.
Circe from the Odyssey is very sexy. She's very, that kind of image of the woman who's sexy and powerful, and therefore the seductress, kind of evil because she's sexy and powerful.
But she also preys on men.
She does. Which is a big thing.
Big thing, yeah.
Big thing with witches.
Probably the primary thing, right?
Yeah.
So she ends up turning most of Odysseus's crew, or a lot of them, she turns them into pigs, animals. Beasts of some sort. And she also keeps him on her island for a long time. It's a long time before he can actually leave.
The seductress, transfiguration. That's one of the big themes.
The magic doing.
Yeah, the magic doing.
I guess that is kind of the primary thing that makes the witch a witch.
That's why she's a witch. Because if she was just sexy and preying on men, she could have been a vampire. But no, she's doing magic.
Oh, yes. There's very specific things that each of these, I guess, monster, I'm saying monster in quotes, things have to do to classify them into that kind of mythical creature.
We're basically going through, the classic, Halloween monsters. We're getting to the root of why they're the classic Halloween monsters.
That's true.
So then we have Hecate. And one of the biggest things here is she's a goddess of magic and spells, but she's not evil. She protects against evil. She wards off evil spirits. So you have a powerful magical woman here, but unlike Circe, she's good, I guess.
But I do want to point out here, because she's usually depicted in 3. And later on it'll be, because 3 is also representative of the Trinity. So it's they're mocking the Trinity, but Hecate predates Christianity. So that's not applicable here.
Mm-mm.
But she is still depicted in 3. And I just pulled out my Dictionary of Classical Mythology.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! It says, and the main thing it says is she's the triple goddess. The moon goddess, and earth goddess, and the underworld goddess. Those are, I guess, the 3 realms. Heaven, earth, and hell. Right?
Yeah.
Also one of the 8 names for the moon.
Moon's got a lot of names.
Yeah.
Why has the moon got so many names? Is it hiding something?
Oh, it's hiding all kinds of things.
Is there a rabbit up there? It's a little discussion for a later time. That's a different mythology.
Yeah,
and especially in...
And that's gonna keep coming up.
Yeah,
over
especially
and over and over.
With magic and women. 3 is very prominent, especially when you get into later, more European pagan religions. You've got the crone, the maiden, the mother figure. I listed those completely out of order, but you get what I mean.
Alright, moving on.
Morgan Le Fay, one of my absolute favorites, because I'm an Arthurian lore nerd.
I've never read Arthurian lore.
Well, the funny thing about Arthurian lore is that since it's lore, there's, like, so much, and it, like, contradicts itself, and sometimes, and, you know.
So it's whatever, it's a choose-your-own-adventure mythology.
Yeah, so it's, like, some of it's based on history, some of it's is, like, you can watch documentaries, it's like, was Arthur a real person? Was he not a real person?
And the answer is a resounding maybe.
Yeah. But Morgan Le Fay, regardless of whether she was real or not, in the mythology, she's magical. So probably, in that sense, she was not fully real. But the interesting thing about Morgan Le Fay is that she has two different kind of, like, versions. So in the early version, she's more of a good figure. You know, she's one of 9 magical sisters in Avalon, which is not the number 3, but...
But it's divisible by 3.
Yes, it's 3 3s. And so, you know, she's educated, she can shapeshift, and fly. So those are kind of two, again, the transfiguration and the flying comes in. But then in later versions, told by different people, she becomes this kind of sexual, she becomes more of a seductress, so she's predatory. She's an apprentice of Merlin, who we'll get into in a second. And that's where you start getting into that whole thing where she's, like, Arthur's half-sister, and then, but they're also, like, sleeping together, and it's, like, weird, and she, like, loves him, but also kills him, and it's a whole thing. The thing there, though, is when she becomes sexual, she then becomes predatory and evil.
Ooh, I'm seeing a theme here.
Yes, which, if you've listened to the Vampire Chit Chat, you may also remember as women who are sexual are bad.
Or any of the Gothic Chit Chats where we discuss the role of women in stories.
That's true. It's very well documented. So that's Morgan Le Fay. And then in Merlin, he's got prophecy and shape-shifting. So we're kind of building on these already established tropes. Well, Merlin, I think, is the quintessential wizard. Like, when you think of a wizard, at least as somebody who is of European descent and, you know, has studied European history, Merlin. Mm-hmm. He, like, there's just so much pop culture. He's, like, the guy in the pointy hat. Well, and supposedly he's half human, half incubus.
Oh my.
So, scandalous. So it's kind of, incubus is kind of a demon, right? But so you have Merlin, and he's an advisor to Arthur. He's like a sage. He's very respectable kind of a thing.
So a completely different portrayal.
A man and a woman who both practice magic. Very different perceptions. At least in the later versions. I don't think Merlin, if memory serves, I don't think Merlin really existed in the originals. I could be wrong.
But see, that would also coincide with the changing of Morgan's role in the story. So we've introduced now the Wise Wizard. Which takes us to our early Middle Ages.
The grimoires.
Yeah.
The cursed books.
The cursed books, the dark books of black magic.
The good stuff. We're getting into the
stuff,
real meat.
The stuff that you can find lists about on YouTube.
So, what did you do?
I read them.
Yeah. So what Sam did was like, I can't, nobody says what's in them. So Sam read them, and then she gave the information to me, so I didn't have to read them. It was great.
If anyone's cursed here, it's me. It's me. Okay, no, I didn't read all of them. I read 2. Or I read 2 and like a third. No, I read 1 and a third.
Okay.
I have... in my hands, it's not actually a full translation, but it's a partial translation and it's discussion, and there's a full transcription of the Munich manuscript.
Which, for anyone who's uninformed,
is a 15th century manual of necromancy. Which is in the Munich library, and you can, if you know how to read German, you can just look it up and look at it on the library website, which I have done.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
15th century, yes. And I also read the first book of the Picatrix, which is 11th century astrology.
Well, that was something that you ran into, is like in the early manuscripts, the magic was science. Like alchemy was science.
So what I kind of concluded from reading these is before science was its own study, you had philosophy, you had religion, and you had magic. And alchemy encompasses somehow all 3 of those.
Yeah, it's like when you go to college, you don't know what you want your major to be, so you do general studies.
Yeah, and then, you decide you want to study alchemy and start digging up body parts and create life in your dorm room.
As you do.
But there was also, especially because the one book was like an analysis, it's like a history textbook.
Yeah.
It's from the Penn State University.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that one.
Yes. You're writing, first of all, these books are written, I mean, obviously the astrology one was written in Arabic, because it's Arabic. This one was written in Latin. So what I was thinking about while I was reading this is, who wrote it and for whom? When you're thinking about, you have this Latin handwritten text, so someone very educated with a lot of time.
Yeah, because back in the day, writing things out and making a manuscript, that took a lot of time and money.
But what was really interesting about the medieval, and especially the Picatrix, is how religious they are. And how much the Munich manuscript invokes demons, but at the same time you're subjugating them in, like, the name of Jesus, etc. So,
very odd sort of relationship.
It's this really big contradiction on, like, what we think of the relationship between magic and religion now, where, like, they're completely opposed to each other because magic, as we'll see, becomes something totally satanic.
If you watch certain ghost hunting idiots on the internet, they visit a trained exorcist, and he's like, you don't want to talk to the ghost, you don't want to invite them to interact with you, like, you don't want to do...
Because that's implied consent.
And, like, that's, like, the whole thing. Or even if you've seen the movie The Exorcist, right?
But here, you're actively summoning demons and then using the name of God to make them do what you want.
Which is a very interesting moral dilemma, I suppose.
We have someone very educated, someone with a lot of time and money, so we can probably safely assume the author is a man. And another thing that really stuck out to me in both texts, this was intended for men to read, and you can tell very clearly in the amount of spells that are meant to subjugate women, to make women fall in love with you, etc., etc. Because this is witchcraft, this is black magic. And honestly, the spells in here, like, the stuff about, oh, they'll summon demons, and then they'll, like, make you an invisibility cloak, whatever. You gotta do it at 3:53 in the morning on the month of the full moon when the moon is on a Thursday. Like, the spells are so, like, convoluted. They're, like, impossible to do. Like, even if any of this was gonna work, the conditions that are required for all this stuff is nearly impossible to meet.
Yeah.
Because they're so specific. Like,
well, I guess that's how you ensure that it's like, as someone's like, hey dude, you sold me this thing and the magic didn't work. It's like, oh, we didn't do it right.
That was another thing I read too. Like, every time magic didn't work, they never blamed the fact that magic just wasn't real, but they blamed themselves for doing the spell wrong.
There's some societal notions buried in there somewhere.
But what I was getting at is, like, that stuff, it didn't bother me. Like, it's kind of goofy, right? And
well, it's
like,
so outrageous.
Oh, summoning Satan, and you're just like, haha, no you're not. But the stuff about how, especially stuff about how to make women fall in love with you. How to make them submit to your will. How to make them do whatever you want them to. That was the stuff that, to me, was truly terrifying.
Yeah, that kind of thinking still exists today. It just shows how pervasive it is.
Okay, so I found the chapter in here about, they're called erotic experiments.
Ugh, gross.
And it says, I'm reading from Forbidden Rites by Richard Kiekeffer. And it says right in here, you can assume that sexual compliance is the main intent. And there's several spells that are several pages long, but they're not easy by any means. And this one here literally requires invoking Satan. And you be doing that, you said, I command you to remain and cause you to love me alone.
God, that's so gross.
And this just goes on for pages and pages, and there's several different versions of this.
Just pro tip, just a thought that I'm having, if the thing you want to do requires the devil, the thing that you're doing is probably not good.
No.
Like, just, yuck, gross, ew.
Yeah, and I don't have my Kindle with me to look up Picatrix, but it wasn't, because that's all about, like, talisman making, and it focuses on, like, the positions of planets.
Yeah, that's the one with, like, the ring, right? Like, you make the ring.
No, the ring was in
the ring was in there.
Yeah, Picatrix was the astrology one. But there was stuff in there, too, so you make different talismans under different planets, and they're supposed to do certain things.
Gotcha.
And okay, yeah, so I found my notebook here, and I wrote down some different notes about each of the chapters, and the one here I very specifically wrote harm to women, i.e. beating by husband.
Ah, yikes.
That was one of the things. So again, we can see who this was written for and by whom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also wrote down some other notes, so a little bit less depressing, I guess. I took some notes about what some of the different planets are supposed to do. The signs of, I wrote down, everything was written in, like, the zodiac alchemy symbols, not actually with the names of the planets.
Yeah, the Sailor Moon symbols.
Yeah. I wrote down some other notes here. So, for example, the moon, you should only use the moon for good spells.
Okay.
The moon's very important.
The moon is the moon.
The moon's very important in Islam, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I've got Gemini, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius, whatever planets those correspond to, represent humans.
Okay.
So those were for spells for like everyday things, like making your crops grow well, having safe travels, developing relationships, toppling kingdoms, war, politics, and gaining the king's favor.
So normal human
just
stuff.
Normal, everyday things that you just might need on the regular.
So what kind of farmer is getting his hands on Picatrix here to subjugate his wife and grow his crops and gain the king's favor?
And topple kingdoms, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright. When the moon is in Scorpio,
Okay.
it represents unbroken friendship. Like, each zodiac sign has a corresponding planet, but because there's more zodiacs than planets, it won't double up. And I thought it was really funny, because she had this whole paragraph about praise to Allah, and then it was like, but anyway, the magic.
And now that we've gotten that out of the way.
Yeah, right? So it's, again, this very contradictory kind of, and I was curious, too, about what the modern-day Islamic stance is about magic, and it was exactly, like, what I thought it would be, whereas you shouldn't seek counsel in any source but Allah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that makes sense to me. Like, okay,
sense.
so, yeah, magic is bad in Islam, too. The
Yeah.
same as it is in Christianity.
They were definitely confused. But one of the main takeaways there is that, first of all, it was written by men for men.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones practicing the magic,
Mm-hmm.
which is definitely different from, this kind of seductress figure that was pretty prominent. Magic wasn't, like, bad. Like, it was...
No, it wasn't. And
It wasn't, like, evil.
I've also read the early church distinguished between different kinds of magic. So there was white magic and black magic. Punishment wasn't that severe.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, I guess, you murdered people. Which
Yeah,
we'll
but that's
into.
murder.
But,
like, you're not getting punished for murdering people for magic. You're getting punished for murdering people. Like, the reason doesn't really matter. It's murder.
Right. The good witch. Like, your herbalist, your folk healer kind of
midwife
lady.
Yeah.
And, like, your wizard, who's...
Yeah, you've also got, like, alchemy. It's like, legitimately, it was, like, a perfectly respectable thing to try and turn, what was it, lead into gold?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was science. Of course, now we're, like, magic weirdos. But anyways, moving on. We're gonna get into... This is one of my recent favorite things. I didn't read this, but I love hearing about it. The witch hammer.
Oh, man.
There's some wild shit in here.
The Malleus Maleficarum.
Oh, man.
I read it.
You did read it.
I read all 536 pages.
The crazy 536.
I read a free Kindle version. The translation wasn't super great, but I read it.
Where do we even want to start?
Am I better for it? I'm not sure. Did I learn some things? Yeah.
Oh, we learned a lot.
We learned a lot
about
of things.
very specific body parts.
Yeah. The background of this is important, because context is everything. You had the Inquisition.
The Inquisition. What is... Sorry. Oh, I had to.
This is the 15th century. Late 15th century, so you had a very specific inquisitor, whose name was Heinrich Kramer. He just had a problem with women.
That's a theme.
Yeah.
That's a very common theme.
So, apparently no one really liked him. Which, I mean, you can see why. I was reading his book, and I thought, man, this guy's never spoken to a woman he didn't piss off.
Yeah. And that's including and starting with his mother.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem like men liked him very much either, because he kept getting kicked out of all these different parishes. By the clergy.
Yeah.
Right? So finally, he sent an appeal to the Pope, and the Pope sent him back what's called a bull, and it was just basically, listen to this guy. Because he wasn't getting anywhere, because no one liked him.
We're going to find out.
That bull becomes important.
Put a little mental little pin in that, audience.
He's sent to this town, this was in Germany. He's sent to a town to oversee a murder trial. And the defendant is a woman who's accused of murdering her husband with witchcraft. And as soon as he's there in the courtroom, this woman's insulting him and spitting on him and just causing a ruckus because she got bad vibes.
Yeah. Right? Listen, I don't blame her.
So he made it his personal agenda to harass and do whatever he could to get her convicted. To the point where the judge threw the case out and the bishop kicked him out of the diocese.
Audience, if you're keeping up, this man is disliked by everyone who comes in contact with him. The Pope gave him a bull, which means that people were supposed to listen to him, but that's probably just because the Pope never met him in person.
Probably.
He just got a letter.
The Pope's just like, yeah, this sounds official, okay.
Yeah, sure. Here you go. Listen, I'm all the way over here in Rome. What do I care what he's doing in Germany?
So Kramer's not really mad about this whole experience. So he sits down and he writes his 500-page essay on why women bad, known as the Malleus Maleficarum,
a.k.a. the Witch Hammer.
also known as the Hexen Hammer, also known as the Hammer of the Witches.
Oh, again, we're getting into it. Boy, buckle in. We're just getting started with this guy. But boy, really, a lot of the bad stuff that comes after him in a history context, which we're not getting into history.
Everything bad that happened with witches is because of him, pretty much there.
Yeah, like, we're only talking about this guy, like, in the literature sense.
Because he wrote a book, and this book changed the course of history.
Literally changed the course of history for the worse. Go look into the history if you want to. We're not getting into it here, but yeah, this guy, shitty.
But the problem is, so he wrote this 500-page book, and he prefaced it with the papal bull saying, hey, listen to this guy. So everyone thought that he had the Pope's approval, which was not the case. And many scholars, officials, theologians did not agree with any of it and very strongly expressed the fact it was not in line with Christian doctrine at all. But it kind of sparked a hysteria.
Yes, because it was also widely distributed, right? That's
because we had the printing press by now.
Yeah, that's, the printing press is great. It's a great invention. It really furthered humanity. However, it really made it possible for this poison to spread.
This is why we had witch hunts and the witch hysteria throughout Europe, into England, Scotland, and eventually it came over to the United States in the form of the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
As I was trying to explain to someone, Salem witch trials were not an isolated incident. Witch hunts and witch trials had been going on in Europe for hundreds of years.
For various reasons. Well, and we're not getting too deep into the history, but a lot of it was based on prejudice against basically anyone different in the community. But then this guy publishes this book, and then it just is like...
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the kinds of people that he very specifically targeted and said, these people are witches. Midwives? Big one. Why? Because witches eat babies, and midwives are stealing your babies and giving them to witches and Satan.
The other thing there, he's attacking midwives. Probably the real reason is because midwives are smart and they know things. I'm translating.
Boy. He says, witches are real. Witches are heretics. If you do not believe me, you're also a heretic.
And now, put yourself in the shoes of somebody, I don't know, some common folk of the time.
A good God-fearing peasant.
Yes, you're not super educated, but you know how to read. But, you don't have a lot of knowledge of higher level philosophy and logic and all that stuff. And this book comes along and everyone's reading it. It's like, oh my god, this is our next book club book. You gotta read it. It's the latest rage.
It's like we're joking, but it was the number 2 bestseller in Europe for 200 years. It was second only to the Bible. For 200 years.
That's a lot of years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of years. You can read, not super educated, you're just a peasant, you're reading this book for your book club, and right in the beginning, letter from the Pope.
Yeah, letter from the Pope, and also, this is real, I'm an authority, if you don't believe me, you're going to hell.
Did you see that letter from the Pope? And you, as a peasant, you're like, oh shit, the Pope says this is good. And he's the authority. He speaks to God directly. But it's like the Pope approved this, that means this is right. This is good. This is Christian. Meanwhile, unknowing that the educated Christian professors and theologists or whatever are like, this guy's fucking nuts. This isn't Christian. This is unchristian, in fact.
Yeah.
But it's too late. The cat's out of the bag. They've run the printing press.
And there's lots of discussion about incubi, succubi, why they're real, how the demons possess people to procreate. Yeah, there was a lot of sex. I was very surprised at how not safe for work most of it was. There was a lot of discussion about sex.
Sex and dicks.
very specifically. Now, it very explicitly, it didn't say dicks, but it said, like, organs, members, all those other terms.
All those, like,
that are used.
Like AO3 or, like, fanfiction.net. Like, synonyms.
Basically, all of them. But then when it got to talking about female body parts, they were too secret and cannot be discussed.
Let's see. It's so heterosexual to talk about dicks. It's so heterosexual. And here's we've discussed this at length at this point. Sorry, my brain just, like, went off the tracks there.
It's the effect of this book.
This book is fucking nuts. Knuckin' futz. Like, I swear to God, this book, like, you were telling me about it.
I was sending you snaps and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you were reading it.
I was reading it. You were literally sending me the book page. I'm reading this. I'm going, this is a joke. This man is just so, everybody hates him, especially women, and he's just so bitter about it. He hates it, but I guess, like, he has a penis, so he knows what that looks like, so he can speak to it, right? Like, that's why he's talking about so much.
Right.
That's the only experience he's ever had. So it's like women lady parts, so they got something, right? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Basically.
Like, the last time I tried to say hi to a woman, she spat on me.
But yeah, there was a lot of discussion about how witches eat babies.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost every single stereotype we had written down was mentioned in here somewhere. It talked about, they like boil babies down, and that's how they make the magic potion for their broomsticks.
Ugh.
With, like, the bones and stuff. That's how they make the brooms fly.
Alright.
Broomsticks were very specifically mentioned in it. It didn't really talk about them being old or ugly. I think that came in later on. It probably also became associated with the fact that so many of the people going to trial were older.
Yeah.
That's probably where a lot of that came from. But yeah, so another thing I was wondering about, because this was something that came up more than once, about witches stealing
Yes, this is
disappearing.
This is the best part. This part is just, it's flabbergasting. Like,
what I want to know is what was going on in the 15th century that so many men thought they were without their
it had to be some sort of sexual disease.
Because he had more than one anecdote about this, too.
Yeah. My personal favorite anecdote was the one where the were in the tree.
Oh yeah, there was the nest in the tree where the witch kept the
Like, this guy, like, it's funny, we're laughing about it, but also, this is the man, this is the book that literally changed history and caused the murder of countless women. And men. And across the world. I mean, obviously, this guy is very, very distinctly targeting women, but not just women were targeted. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's in a tree. There's in a tree. Oh, you lost your maybe if you go to the tree, you can find another.
Yeah, send the guy up to go pick a new one.
Yeah, go pick a.
And then she wouldn't let him take the biggest one.
It had to have been some sort of, like, I don't know, STD or something. It's like,
see, that's what I was thinking, but then he described it. It was like, like a Ken doll. Just nothing there.
It's in a tree. It's in a tree. Go pick one. Go pick not the big one. What do you gotta do to get the big one?
That belonged to the parish priest.
Of course it did.
Obviously, sexuality was a big thing, but that also can tie us back into sex plus women equals bad. For a minute. Takeaway. Like, there was a lot in there.
Yeah, 536 pages.
But that's what a lot of it was about. And about the eating babies and the midwives. And just various anecdotes about witches, like, changing the weather and how they were caught and all this different stuff.
Yeah.
And then the last third or so of the book was about how to actually conduct a witch trial. Mm-hmm. And it didn't go into specifics, but it very explicitly, plainly, literally said, torture is okay.
Great.
Didn't specify what kind of torture, so that's up to your own discretion. But you can torture them until they confess.
And again, at the beginning of this book, this guy puts his papal bull in. So people are reading it are like, oh, okay. The Pope is like, yeah, torture these bitches. Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm good. God will forgive me. Yeah, all around, bad. Bad man. Wrote bad things. Caused a whole bunch of bad things. Here we are today.
It did say some interesting stuff about demons, though, and why you have to be possessed by a demon. Because demons don't have lungs, and therefore cannot speak.
Oh, okay. That's a new one. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's an old one.
But there was this whole discussion about, like, demon lack of anatomy, and that's why they need to possess human bodies.
Yeah, usually when people spin that, it's like, oh, well, you know, because they live in a different plane of existence, so in order to access ours...
They're purely, like, spiritual beings, which is, like, kind of like a form of energy, right? They don't have corporeal bodies. So in order to actually interact with... And that's why Satan uses witches to do bad things, because they have, you know, corporeal bodies and can actually interact with the physical world.
Yeah, like, it makes sense, but I guess the lungs is just kind of surprising.
I mean, this is also because I took no notes, so I remembered quite a bit.
Yeah. Man, it really just, like, smashed you in the face, though. Like, I remembered what you snapped me, because it was just so ridiculous. And I only read a few pages.
It was equal parts horrifying and hilarious.
Like, it's hilarious as modern people who are not being actively victimized by it.
Correct.
I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time.
No, especially in the Middle Ages. In that book that we created that modeled the universe on.
Yes. You can check TikTok and Instagram. And
the universe according to the Middle Ages. Yeah, I skipped over his discussion of the witch hammer because I wanted to read it for myself.
Yeah, no spoilers.
I don't want to spoil it, so I skipped over it. But he talked a lot about, like, alchemists and, like, the wizards and, like, you know, how they were considered to be learned and respectable men. But he had one very striking point about the Middle Ages, about how they were so obsessed with the devil. Yeah. And they saw the devil in everything. And in a way, they created their own hell. Yeah. Because they saw hell everywhere they looked.
Well, and that's interesting, too, because keeping it in a literature vein, look at someone like Nathaniel Hawthorne, whose literature was based in kind of colonial Salem or, like, Salem witch trials era, whatever. And that was a big thing, is, like, they literally believed that they were born into purgatory. He believed he was born into purgatory. And in order to ascend to heaven, like, you had to get through purgatory. Like, this is actually hell. Like, that was the thing. That's the thing that people believed. Craziness.
The point of the witch hammer, though, is we've now made witchcraft really bad. Magic, bad.
And very heavily associated with women, specifically older women, widows, single women, midwives, aka, like, herbalists, are suddenly becoming targeted, which stays a theme.
This shapes our idea of what a witch is. Alright, should we move on then?
Yeah.
To a piece of literature pretty much directly influenced by a witch trial which happened in Scotland, which was discussed. See, I didn't even talk about King James yet.
No, there's a lot to get through.
King James included a, I guess, transcript of this witch trial in his own his treatise about witchcraft, which is called Demonology.
Yep.
Which I started reading. I didn't finish it, but it had one of my favorite. Apparently it was a popular, well-known saying at the time. They that sup with the devil have need of long spoons. Amazing phrase.
So good. It's so good. So good.
But King James wrote a treatise about witchcraft because he had traveled to Europe during the height of the witch hysteria, was told that because there was a storm on their voyage over and they almost sank, he was told that witches had tried to kill him and had caused the storm, and from then on, King James is terrified of witches. King James takes the witch hunts and the witch hammer back to England with him.
Yes, now this is, for anyone who's listening to this who has watched or read Good Omens, this part of the history plays very heavily into Good Omens, so you will be familiar with this.
Well-known witch trial in Scotland. And that has a pretty direct influence on the work of a William Shakespeare.
Billy S. Yes. Everyone's favorite William Shakespeare. If you haven't guessed what it is by the word Scottish yet.
Right, I should have given it away.
It's Macbeth. We're talking about Macbeth.
Witches in Macbeth. First of all, 3 of them.
There's 3 of them.
3 of them. This magical number comes back.
Old hags.
They are.
They've got their bubbly little cauldron.
Bubble, bubble,
toil and trouble.
Funny story. I learned that some of what we consider, like, witch potion ingredients, like Eye of Newt and some of that, are actually just old terms for different herbs.
Yeah, I think, like, Eye of Newt is, like, mustard seed or something.
Yeah, it's not literally Newt's eyes.
Yeah. But it certainly makes it sound spookier than mustard seed.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
in terms of cultural impact, Shakespeare is very high up there. Particularly if you're European or American or in an English-speaking country. Shakespeare is a large part of what you do in the teenage years
in
of school.
English class.
Yeah. Depiction of 3 old hags with the cauldrons, bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, like, those are very pervasive throughout, media, pop culture, like, books, movies, TV.
Yep, and just reinforcing this idea of who a witch is.
Yes. So that is,
that's our, I guess, like, our...
Part 1.
Our ancient through the Renaissance portion of this chat. So we're gonna come back with part 2.
Yeah, stay tuned for the next installment.